At 5:48 on a Thursday morning, Renee Holloway stood at the church office copy machine, pressing the green button 40 times, once for each bulletin the 8 o'clock service would need. In her left hand she held a white hospital envelope she had stopped opening on the third day, because by then she had the number by heart the way other women knew scripture. $47,200, what was left after the insurance took its share and walked away. Renee did not know that the man who would sit in pew 12 that Sunday had not set foot in Memphis in 30 years, or that her mother, Dorothy, had once saved his life in a way no one saw and no one ever thanked her for. He did not know that in 11 days the hospital would need $14,000 more to hold Miss Dott's operating room or give her slot to someone else. Neither of them knew that the woman bent over the copier was the reason they were both about to be in the same room. Renee's alarm went off at 4:50 every morning, and she was usually awake before it. She lived in a one-bedroom on Mississippi Boulevard in South Memphis, $785 a month, on the second floor of a building that ran its hot water cold by 6 o'clock if you weren't first in line. She was first in line. She washed quick, dressed quicker, and was at the bus stop on the corner by 5:32, where the number 50 came if it came, and where she stood under a streetlight that had been flickering since the spring. The ride to Methodist South was 38 minutes when the bus ran on time. Renee used the 38 minutes the way she used everything, carefully. She did the math she did every week. $12.40 an hour, 40 hours came to $496 before they took anything out. Rent was $196 a week if she set it aside in quarters. $300 a month went to her mother, for the pills the insurance called optional. What was left was what was left, and she had stopped being surprised by how little that was. She worked in the cafeteria on the ground floor of the hospital, 6 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon, in a hairnet and a green apron that had faded to the color of weak tea. She ran the breakfast line and then the lunch line, and in between she wiped the steel and refilled the pans and learned the names of people who never learned hers. She was good at it. She did not say so, because Holloway women did not say such things about themselves, but she knew the difference between a job done and a job done right, and she did hers right. There was a thing she did on Fridays that no one knew about. On the 4th floor, in room 412, there was a man named Mr. Caldwell who was 70 years old and had been there since March. Renee had never met him. She knew about him because the nurses talked and because in 8 months no one had come to see him. No daughter, no son, no neighbor, nobody. On Fridays, when the breakfast service was over and the warming pan still held 1 or 2 untouched plates that would otherwise go in the trash, Renee made up scrambled eggs, 2 biscuits, a cup of the good coffee from the back, not the urn coffee. She put it in a small white bag, carried it up in the service elevator on her 15-minute break, and set it down on the floor outside 412. Then she went back down. She never knocked. She did not want thanks. She did not even want him to know it was a person. She wanted him to open his door on a Friday and find that the world had remembered him, and to let him believe, if he wanted to, that it was the world and not a tired woman in a tea-colored apron. She did not tell anyone. She had learned that from her mother, who had been doing things like that her whole life and never once mentioned them. When Renee was small, she had watched Miss Dot wrap a plate of supper in a dish towel and walk it 3 doors down to a family that had a hard year, and walk back with the empty towel and never say a word about it, not at the table, not ever. "Don't go telling it," her mother had said once the one time Renee asked. "The minute you tell it, you done it for the telling. Then it ain't a gift no more, it's a receipt." Renee had not understood that at 9. She understood it now. A gift you tell about is a receipt. She left her white bags outside room 412 and went back down in the service elevator, and she kept no receipts. Renee was 34. She had wanted, once, to be a nurse. She'd been good at it, better than good. In the fall of 2014, she had been in the 2nd year of the nursing program at the community college, halfway to the only thing she had ever let herself want, when her mother's heart had stumbled for the first time, and the doctors used a word, cardiomyopathy, that none of them had ever heard before. Somebody's had to stay home. Renee had 3 brothers, and they all had reasons, and so the somebody was Renee. Deshawn, the oldest, had said it plain in the hospital hallway that fall. "You go on and finish school, Renee. We'll handle the money side. That's a man's job anyway." He had said it with his hand on her shoulder, and she had believed him, because he was her brother and he was 36 and he owned an auto detail shop on Lamar that he was proud of, and a man with his own business kept his word. The money side was never handled. The bills came and went to her. The pharmacy calls came to her. The somebody became the everybody, and by the time the spring semester started, Renee had withdrawn from her classes to keep her mother alive, and she had told herself it was temporary, and then 10 years had gone by, and she was running a breakfast line in a building full of nurses who did not know her name. She did not blame her mother for it. She blamed no one out loud. But there were nights she lay in the dark on Mississippi Boulevard and felt the shape of the life she had set down, still warm, the way you can feel the shape of a person who has just gotten up from the bed beside you. Her mother had a saying. Dorothy Holloway had a saying for most things, but there was one she had given Renee directly. The year Renee's father left and did not come back, the year Renee was 9. They had been sitting on the front porch on a hot night, and Renee had asked, in the way a child asks, whether somebody was going to come and help them now. Her mother had been shelling peas into a metal bowl, and she had not stopped shelling, and she had said, "Holloway women wait for the saving, baby. We do the saving." Renee had carried that the way you carry a stone in your pocket, smooth from handling. She had done the saving. She had done it for 10 years. She was tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. The surgery her mother needed now was a heart valve, a replacement, and the surgeon had been kind about it and clear. With it, Miss Dot could have years, good years. Without it, the surgeon had not said. He had only looked at Renee in a way that said it for him. The insurance Renee had through the hospital covered her mother as a dependent, barely, and after the deductible and the out-of-network surgeon and the things the policy called this and that, the family share came to $4,200. The hospital wanted 30% up front to schedule it. $14,160. They wanted it by the 16th. Renee had $1,100 in a savings account at the credit union. She had stopped doing that particular piece of math because there was no version of it that ended anywhere but the same place. So on a Tuesday evening, the week before the bulletins, she called a family meeting. They met in their mother's kitchen on Effie Road, the house all 4 of them had grown up in. A narrow shotgun house with a porch that sagged on the left and a kitchen that still smelled like every Sunday of their childhood. Miss Dot was asleep in the back room. On the stove, a pot of collard greens was going low and slow because Renee had started them out of habit when she arrived. The way you put on coffee, the way you keep the house alive while you wait for hard news. The smell filled the small room, smoked turkey neck, vinegar, the green going soft. Deshawn came in his work shirt with the shop's name stitched on the pocket. Andre came from his job at the county clerk's office, still in his tie. Terrence came last, the youngest, 31, and he came in quiet and stayed by the door like a man who knew he was about to be asked for something he did not have. Renee had the hospital paper folded on the table. She unfolded it. She read them the number out loud because she wanted them to hear it in her voice and not see it on a page they could put down. 14,160, she said. That's just to schedule it. That's the first part. If we split it 4 ways, that's 3,540 apiece. I've got 1,100. I can have the rest of my part by the 16th if I borrow against next month. I'm asking the 3 of you for 3,500 each. The kitchen was quiet except for the greens. Deshawn spoke first, the way he always did. He was a big man and he sat down heavy in the chair their father used to sit in and he rubbed his face with both hands. "Renee," he said. "I want to. You know I want to, but I got payroll Friday. I got 4 guys depending on me, and the shop's been slow since the new place opened on Getwell. I pull 3,500 out right now. Somebody don't eat." "Deshawn, this is Mama." "I know it's Mama." His voice rose and then caught, and he brought it back down. "Don't you put it like I don't know it's Mama. I'm telling you what I got. I got a business to keep alive. Family does what it can, Renee. That's all anybody owes. That's all any of us can do." He turned his glass of sweet tea in a slow circle on the table. "I'm tight too," he said. "Real tight, Renee. We just put Bree in the daycare and that's 900 a month right there. Maybe I could do 500. I'd have to see." Terrence said nothing at all. Terrence had been behind on a truck note since February and they all knew it. And Renee did not even turn to him because to turn to him would have been to ask him to say it in front of everybody, and she would not do that to him. He was the only one of them who had ever sat with their mother in the hospital without being asked, the only one who came on his own, and Renee had decided a long time ago that there was more than one way to be a son. She looked at the 3 of them in the kitchen, where they had been boys. She did not cry. She had a rule about that in front of them. She folded the paper back along its creases slow and she put it in her purse and she stood up. "All right," she said. That was all. She said it the way her mother said, "Amen," the way you close a thing you have decided to carry by yourself. Then she went to the stove and turned down the greens so they wouldn't scorch, and she got a sponge and started on the dishes in the sink, with her back to her brothers, because there was nothing left to say and the dishes were dirty and somebody was going to have to wash them. Behind her, one by one, her brothers found reasons to leave. The call from the hospital came on Wednesday, a little after 11 in the morning, while Renee was on the line ladling grits. She felt the phone buzz against her hip through the apron and she let it go. "Because you did not answer your phone on the line," and then it buzzed again. and something in the rhythm of it made her hand off the ladle and step back into the dish room to answer. It was a woman from Patient Financial Services, a woman named Karen who had a soft voice and a script. Renee had spoken to her twice before. Karen was not unkind. That was the thing Renee would think about later, that none of them were unkind, that the whole machine was made of people doing their jobs in soft voices, and that a soft voice can take everything from you just the same. "Miss Holloway, I'm following up on the scheduled procedure for Dorothy Holloway," Karen said. "I'm showing we still need the first deposit to hold the surgical date. That's $14,160. We'd need that posted by close of business on the 16th. If we don't have it by then, I'm so sorry, but the surgeon's coordinator will have to release the slot, and your mother would go back on the scheduling list." Renee stood in the dish room with the steam coming up off the racks and the spray nozzle hissing somewhere behind her and the smell of bleach and old food, and she said, "How long is the list?" There was a pause on the line, the pause of a person looking at something she did not want to read aloud. "I'm not able to give you a definite time frame," Karen said gently. "It can move. It depends on a lot of things." It depends on a lot of things. Renee knew what that meant. She had worked in a hospital for 10 years. She knew that a list was a polite word for a kind of waiting that some people did not finish. "Okay," Renee said. "Thank you, Karen." "I really am sorry, Miss Holloway. Would you like me to send you information on financial assistance?" "There's an application. It takes about 30 days to process." 30 days, the 16th was in 8. "That's all right," Renee said. "I'll figure it." And she hung up, and she put the phone back in the apron pocket, and she picked up a tray that needed running and she ran it, because the line did not stop just because a list might not finish, and there was nobody else to do her job, and there never had been. She tried Deshawn one more time. She told herself she wasn't going to, and then on Saturday afternoon she got on the bus and rode out to Lamar anyway because he was her brother, and because she had decided she would rather ask twice and be turned down twice than spend the rest of her life wondering whether the second ask was the one that would have worked. The shop was busy. 2 cars up on the lot getting buffed, a young man Renee didn't know running a wax pad over a hood, music coming out of a speaker on a paint bucket. Deshawn was at the front counter ringing up a customer, a man in a golf shirt with keys to a German car. And Deshawn was good with him, easy and warm, the way Deshawn was with everybody who wasn't asking him for something. Renee waited until the man left. "Deshawn." He looked up and his face did the thing she knew it would do. The warmth went somewhere behind a door, and what was left was tired and a little angry before she had said a word, because he knew why she was there. "Renee, I'm not going to make a scene." She kept her voice low. The young man with the wax pad had stopped pretending not to listen. "I'm asking you one more time, not for the whole thing, for whatever you can do. 500, 1,000, anything I can put toward holding the date Tuesday." Deshawn set down the receipt book. He came around the counter and he stood close to her, and when he spoke it was quiet, and that was almost worse than if he had shouted. "You think I don't lay awake about it?" he said. "You think it don't eat me? It's Mama, Renee. I know it's Mama, but I am not made of money. I got this shop on my back and a mortgage and a daughter starting school in the fall, and I cannot pull blood out of a stone because you decided you the only one allowed to carry this family. Family does what it can. That's all anybody owes. That's all. You've been telling yourself a long time that the rest of us don't love her because we can't do what you do. That ain't love, Renee. That's just you needing to be the one." It landed. She would not let him see that it landed. She looked at her oldest brother, at the boy who had once carried her on his shoulders to the corner store, at the man who put his hand on her shoulder in a hospital hallway in 2014 and told her to go finish school, that the money side was a man's job. And she understood with a clean and terrible clarity that he had needed to believe that as much as she had, and that neither of them had ever forgiven the other for what came after. "Okay, Deshawn," she said. That was all. She turned and she walked out past the cars and the music and the young man with the wax pad, who suddenly found a great deal to be interested in on the hood in front of him, and she stood at the bus stop on Lamar in the heat with her back straight and her eyes dry, and she waited for the number 50, which came when it came. The man who would do what her brothers would not was, at that hour, 400 miles away in a hotel in Atlanta, standing at a window on the 31st floor, looking at a city that was not his city, holding a glass of bourbon he had not touched. His name was Solomon Tate. He was 58 years old. He had built, over 30 years, a commercial real estate company that owned pieces of 3 southern cities, and he had done it the way a man does a thing when he is running from something, completely and without rest. He had a corner office in a building he owned and a name that bankers returned calls for, and he had a hole in him the exact shape and size of his mother, and no amount of square footage had ever filled it. Solomon had grown up 6 blocks from a church in South Memphis. His mother was May Tate, and she took in washing and pressing for the houses up in the better part of town, and she made $6.50 an hour doing it when she could get the hours, which was not always. They lived in 2 rooms behind a shut-down dry cleaner. Solomon's father was a name on no document Solomon had ever seen. May Tate was a small woman with strong hands and a way of humming under her breath while she worked that her son could still hear on bad nights all these years later. She believed in 2 things without apology: that the Lord saw what people did when they thought no one was looking, and that you fed a person before you asked them anything. She fed everybody. She fed neighbors who couldn't pay and church folk who could, and the boys from the corner who scared everyone but her. She would set a plate in front of a man and say, "Eat first, we'll talk after." And Solomon had watched grown men go soft in the face at the simple fact of it. In 1986, when Solomon was 19, his mother's heart began to fail. It was the same word the surgeons would use about Renee Holloway 30 years later. Though Solomon did not know that yet, and would not know it until it was almost too late to matter, May Tate needed an operation. The estimate, written on a piece of paper a clinic clerk slid across a counter without looking up, was $38,000. The insurance was nothing because there was no insurance. Solomon was washing dishes at a diner on Summer Avenue for $2.35 an hour, and he did the math the way his mother's daughter would one day do it in a different kitchen. And the math did not end anywhere a person could live. He asked everyone. He went to family that turned out to be family only in the easy seasons. He went to the men his mother had fed. He went at the end to people he did not know, and he learned that summer how a man's voice sounds when he is begging and trying not to, and he never forgot the sound of it because it was his own. He remembered the diner owner most clearly, a man named Pruitt who ran the place on Summer Avenue where Solomon washed dishes. Solomon had worked for him 11 missing a day, and one slow afternoon he had stood in the back hall with his apron still wet and asked Pruitt for a loan against a year of wages, and Pruitt, who was not a bad man, who would later come to the funeral and bring a ham, had looked at his shoes and said, "Son, I'd help you if I could, but I got my own. You understand?" Solomon had said, "Yes, sir." He understood. He always said he understood. That was the thing about the not enough. Everyone who turned you down had a reason you could understand, and the reasons were all true, and your mother died anyway among 100 understandable reasons, and there was no one to be angry at, which was the worst part, because anger at least gives a man something to hold. He remembered, too, a thing his mother said near the end. He had come home one night from a day of asking, empty-handed again, and he had sat on the edge of her bed too ashamed to look at her, and May Tate had reached over with her light paper hand and turned his face toward her. "Solomon," she said, "I don't want you carrying this, you hear me? You did everything a son could do. The Lord sees what you did. You stop adding it up." But he had not stopped adding it up. He had added it up for 30 years. Nobody gave enough. A little here, a little there. Not enough, never enough, and the not enough has its own particular cruelty, the way it lets you keep hoping while the days run out. May Tate died 4 months later on a Tuesday, waiting on a list in a county bed, with her son holding her strong small hand that had gone light as paper. She was 44 years old. Solomon left Memphis within the month. He took a bus to Nashville with a duffel bag and a debt to nobody and a vow he had made over his mother's body and never once said out loud, that he would become a man who would never again have to stand in a room and watch someone he loved die for the lack of money he did not have. He kept the vow. He kept it the way other men kept faith, fiercely at a cost. He made the money. He made far more than the vow required. And the strange thing, the thing that woke him at 4 in the morning in a different city every few years, was that he had never figured out where to set it down. There had been one place, before all of it, where Solomon Tate had been seen. In the last 2 years of his mother's life, when things were at their worst and home was 2 cold rooms, Solomon had started going to the church up the street on Sunday mornings. He did not go for God, or not only. He went because the sanctuary had a window air conditioner that worked, and because it was the one room in his world where a young man with holes in his shoes could sit for an hour and not have anyone look at him like he was about to take something. There was a young woman there, a Sunday school teacher, maybe 30, with a steady face and a way of moving down the aisle that made the room calmer. She noticed him the first Sunday, noticed the shoes, noticed that he sat in the very back near the door the way people sit when they are not sure they are allowed to stay. The second Sunday, before he came in, she put her own Bible and her own purse down on the bench 12 rows from the front, on the left by the window, in the good cool air, and when Solomon came in late and small, she met his eye and tipped her head toward it. "Saved you a seat." She did it every Sunday for 2 years. Pew 12. She never asked him a single thing. Not his name, not where he stayed, not why a boy his age came to church alone. She just kept the seat. She left a wrap sandwich on it. "Eat first," the sandwich said, in a language he understood. "We'll talk after." They never did talk after. He was too proud and too young, and she was too wise to push. And then his mother got sick and he stopped coming, and then his mother died and he left town, and he never learned the woman's name. He thought about her more than he had ever told anyone. In his corner office, in his hotels, in the long, quiet hours of a wealthy man with nothing in his hands, Solomon Tate thought about the woman who had kept Pew 12, and he understood, in the way you come to understand things slowly, and then all at once, that she had been the only person in his entire life who had given him something and asked for nothing, and that he had never gotten the chance to give anything back, and that this, not his mother's grave, not even the money, was the unfinished thing in him. What I couldn't do then I carry now, he would tell himself. But he had never known what to do with what he carried, because he did not know where the woman was, or whether she was living, or whether she would even remember a quiet boy in bad shoes. He came back to Memphis that week for a building. There was a property in Midtown his company was looking at, a block of old warehouses with good bones, and he had flown in on a Friday meaning to be gone by Sunday night. He had not planned to stay through Sunday morning. He had not planned anything about Sunday morning at all. He woke in the hotel before light, the way his mother used to wake, and he lay there in the dark of a strange room in his own hometown, and he found that he could not name a single place in the city of Memphis that he wanted to go. So he got in the rental car and he drove south into the old streets, past the corners he knew and the corners that were gone, and his hands turned the wheel without asking him, and after a while he was parked across from a church he had not seen in 30 years, watching people in their Sunday clothes climb the steps he had once climbed in shoes that let in the rain. The sanctuary at Greater Calvary on a Sunday morning in late spring was full of light and the low sound of people settling in. The choir was warming up, the window air conditioner, a newer one now, but in the same window, hummed its same low note. Renee Holloway had come early as she always did, and she sat in the back on the right side in the corner, with her mother's Bible held in both hands in her lap. Her mother had given it to her the week before.
Take it.
Miss Dot had said, from her chair by the window, her breath short the way it got now. I know it by heart. So Renee had brought it, though she had not opened it. It was an old Bible, the cover soft and dark as a worn shoe, the gilt long gone from the page edges, the spine held with a strip of cloth tape her mother had put on it decades ago. Across the front in her mother's careful hand in ink faded almost to nothing, it said, Dorothy J. Holloway. Renee held it because holding it was close to holding her mother, and because she was 11 days out and 47,000 short, and a person has to hold something. She did not pray for the money. She had stopped praying for the money the way she had stopped opening the envelope. She prayed instead the way her mother had taught her, which was not asking but keeping company, and she sat in the cool light and kept company with whatever was there, and she did not see the man who came in late and stood a moment in the door, looking down the aisle at a bench 12 rows from the front, on the left by the window, that was, this morning, empty. Solomon Tate stood in the doorway of the church he had not entered in 30 years and looked at Pew 12. No one had saved it for him. The woman with the steady face was not there. The years had taken her from that aisle, and he did not know to look for her in a chair on Effie Road with a failing heart. But the seat was empty, the way a seat is sometimes empty, and Solomon's legs carried him down the aisle the way they had carried him out of the hotel without consulting him, and he sat down in Pew 12 in the good cool air by the window and folded his hands, and did not understand the thing that was happening in his chest, which was that for the first time in 30 years he had come home and did not yet know it. 4 rows behind him, off to the right, a tired woman held a soft dark Bible in her lap, and on its cover, had he turned, he would have read a name he had spent half his life trying to remember. They sat through the whole service like that. A stranger in the seat that had once been kept for him, and the daughter of the woman who had kept it, 4 rows apart, neither one knowing, while the choir sang and the light moved slow across the floor, and a church full of people who had no idea what was in the room, with them rose and sat and rose again. There were moments during the hour when the two of them were closer than 4 rows. When the congregation stood to sing, Renee stood too, holding her mother's Bible against her chest the way you hold a child. And from the front Solomon could have turned his head and seen, over the shoulders of the people between them, a soft dark cover and the ghost of a name in faded ink. And he did not turn his head because he had no reason to. Because the past does not announce itself, it only sits 4 rows back and waits. When the offering plates went down the rows, Renee passed hers along without putting anything in it. She had nothing to put, and the shame of that was an old familiar shame she had stopped flinching at. And Solomon, when the plate reached Pew 12, took out his wallet and folded a bill into it without looking, the reflex of a man for whom money had long ago stopped being the thing that was missing. 2 people in one room, One with a hole where the money was, and one with a hole the money had never touched, and the same woman, dead nowhere and alive on Effie Road, standing invisible between them. The choir sang a song May Tate used to hum over the wash, and Solomon Tate, 58 years old, in a $1,000 suit, in the cool air by the window, put his hand over his own mouth and did not know why his eyes had filled. He thought it was the music. It was not the music. When it was over, the congregation filed out into the warm morning in 2s and 3s, and the sanctuary emptied the way a tide goes out. Renee did not move. She had nowhere she had to be until 2, when she went to sit with her mother, and the cool quiet of the empty church was the only quiet she had all week, and she meant to keep it a little longer. Miss Estelle Cook was turning off the lights. Estelle had been the church secretary for 40 years, and she put the lights out the way she did everything, row by row, in order, taking her time, because at 72 she had earned the right to take her time, and because she liked the church best when it was nearly empty and she could feel the size of it. She came down the side aisle, clicking off the switches, and she saw the Holloway girl sitting alone in the corner with Dorothy's Bible, and her heart went out to her the way the whole congregation's heart had, quietly, because everyone knew about Miss Dot, and everyone knew the brothers, and everyone had their opinions and kept them, mostly. Then Estelle saw the man. He was standing near the back, by the door, a well-dressed man of about 60 she did not recognize, and he had not left with the others. He was looking at the girl. No, he was looking at the Bible in the girl's hands, and there was something in his face that made Estelle stop with her hand on a light switch and not turn it off. She had a long memory, Estelle Cook, 40 years of faces in that room. She looked at the man, at the set of his shoulders and the way he held his head a little down, and something far back in her memory turned over, slow like a key in an old lock. She did not say anything yet. She just stood there in the half-dark with her hand on the switch and watched the stranger take one step, and then another, down the aisle toward the woman with the Bible, and Estelle Cook felt the air in the room change. The way it does right before a thing happens that you will tell people about for the rest of your life. Continued from part 1. The stranger stopped at the end of Renee's pew. She felt him there before she looked up. The way you feel a person waiting at the edge of your quiet, and when she did look up, she saw a tall man in a dark suit, 60 or near it, with gray coming in close at his temples and a face that was holding something carefully, the way you hold something that might spill. "Excuse me," he said. His voice was low and even. "I don't mean to bother you. Is that Dorothy Holloway's Bible?" Renee looked down at the soft dark cover in her hands, at her mother's name gone almost to nothing in the faded ink, and then back up at the man. "It's my mother's," she said. "Do you know her?" Something moved through the man's face and was gone. He did not answer right away. He looked at the Bible the way a person looks at a face in a crowd that they have not seen in 30 years and cannot quite believe. "May I sit?" he said. She moved her purse off the bench. He sat down in the pew in front of her and turned sideways to face her, one arm along the back of the seat, and for a moment he just looked at the window, at the cool light coming through it, at the air conditioner humming its low note in the same window where another one had hummed a long time ago. "A long time back," he said. "When I was about 19, I used to come to this church. I didn't have anybody. My mother was real sick and we didn't have much, and I'd come in on Sunday mornings and sit in the back so nobody'd look at me too hard." He paused. "There was a young woman taught the children's class. I never knew her name. Every Sunday before I even got here, she'd put her own things down on a seats and save it for me. Right up there." He tipped his head toward the front, toward pew 12, where he had been sitting all morning. 12th row, by the window where the air was good. Some Sundays there'd be a sandwich on the seat. She never asked me one question, never made me say a word. She just kept the seat for me. 2 years, and then my mother passed and I left this city and I never got to tell her what it meant." Renee had gone very still. "I have spent my whole life," the man said, and his even voice had a fine crack in it now, hairline, the way old porcelain cracks, "trying to find a way to pay that back, and I never could, because I never knew who she was. You don't forget a thing like that," he went on, more to the window than to her. "A person can go a long time being looked through, like you were not all the way there, like the room would be the same with you in it or not, and then one day somebody puts their pocketbook down on a bench and saves you a place, and it's nothing, it costs them nothing, and it's the biggest thing anybody ever did for you, and you spend 30 years trying to understand how something that small held you up that long." He shook his head slowly. "I built a company. I own buildings in 3 cities. And the truest thing anybody ever gave me was a seat by a window and a sandwich from a woman who never once asked my name." Behind them, at the end of the aisle, Estelle Cook had taken her hand off the light switch. The man reached into his jacket. He took out a checkbook and a pen, and he laid the checkbook flat on the back of the pew, and he began to write, and Renee watched his hand move because she could not look at his face. She did not understand yet what was happening. She only knew that a stranger was telling her something true about her mother that she had never heard, and that there is a particular kind of grief in learning that the person you love best had a whole life of quiet goodness that you only catch the edge of, like a hymn disappearing around a corner. The man tore the check along its perforation, slow, and he held it out to her. Renee did not take it. She looked at it in his hand. Then she looked at it for a long time, and she did not breathe right, and she did not speak, and she sat as still as the saints in the window for 14 full seconds, which is a very long time to sit and not breathe, while the dust turned in the light between them. She turned it over and read the number, and the number was $47,200. Not the deposit, not the $14,000 to hold the date, the whole thing, the exact whole thing to the dollar, the number she had stopped opening the envelope to avoid, the number she knew the way she knew her own birthday, written out in a steady hand on a line that had her mother's name above it. "How did you know?" she said. Her voice did not break, it only got small. "How did you know the number?" "I didn't," the man said. "I just knew the number a long time ago. It was 38,000 when it was my mother. I always figured it'd be more by now." Renee's hands had started to shake, and to have something to do with them, she opened the Bible. The way she did when she was overwhelmed, a habit from childhood, just to let it fall open where it wanted. It fell open near the middle, at the 23rd Psalm, the page softest there from all the years of her mother's thumb, and a small square of folded paper that had been pressed flat between the pages for 3 decades slipped out and landed in her lap. She picked it up and unfolded it. It was a note, no bigger than a playing card, the paper gone soft and brown at the creases. The handwriting was her mother's, younger but unmistakably her mother's, the same careful hand as the name on the cover. It said, "God sees you, Solomon D. Holloway." The man was staring at the note in her hand, and all the careful holding had left his face, and what was under it was a 19-year-old boy. "I thought that was lost," he said. His voice had almost no sound in it. "She put it on the seat. The last Sunday I came. I kept it in my pocket till the pocket wore out, and then I thought I lost it." He stopped. "I never knew her name. I never knew that she kept—" "Solomon," Renee said. She said it like a question and like an answer, and the man closed his eyes. It was Estelle Cook who said the rest of it. She had come up the aisle in her slow way, and she stood at the end of the pew now, this small, fierce woman who had watched 40 years of faces pass through that room, and she looked at the man's face that had finally let go of what it was holding, and her hand went up to her own mouth. "Lord have mercy," Estelle said softly. "That's the Tate boy. That's May Tate's boy." She shook her head slow, her eyes wet and certain. "Your pumma kept that pew for this child every Sunday for 2 years. 12th row, right by the window. I watched her do it. She'd come in early just to set her things down so he'd have a place, and she never told a living soul. I asked her once who she was saving it for, and she said, 'That's between me and the Lord, Estelle. Go on and mind the bulletins.'" Estelle's voice gave way, just a little. "She never told a soul." And that was the thing that broke Renee Holloway. Not the check, not even the note. It was, she never told a soul. Because Renee knew that woman, knew her down to the bone, knew the apron and the cast iron skillet and the pea shelled into the metal bowl, and had spent 10 years of her own life learning to do good in silence the way her mother did, leaving white bags outside hospital doors and never knocking. And she had never once known that her mother had done the same thing 30 years before she was born, for a boy with holes in his shoes, in this very room. She had inherited it without being told. It had come down to her like the Bible, like the name, hand to hand, quiet, asking nothing. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Renee cried in front of people. Not the way people cry in movies. She cried the way you cry when something true finally has a place to land. Almost without sound, her hand over her mouth, her shoulders going. In a cool, empty church with a stranger and an old woman holding a check and a 30-year-old note in the same 2 hands. Solomon Tate stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He did not say anything else, because there was nothing else that needed saying, and because his mother had taught him that you feed a person before you ask them anything, and he had just at last set the plate down. 3 weeks later, on a clear morning in June, he came back. The surgery had gone well. Miss Dott's new valve had taken, and her color had come back, and the surgeon, who had not let himself say much before, had let himself say a great deal after. She was home on Effie Road, in the chair by the window, with strict instructions and a list of pills and a daughter who hovered, and on a Saturday morning there was a knock at the door, and when Renee opened it, Solomon Tate was standing on the sagging porch with his hat in his hands. He had not called ahead. He did not have a gift, he had only come. Deshawn and Andre were in the kitchen. They came around more now, since the surgery, in the way people come around once the danger and the bill have both been handled by someone else. And Deshaun heard a man's voice at the door and came out wiping his hands on a dish towel, and he looked at the well-dressed stranger and did not know him from Adam. And Renee did not introduce them, and she watched her oldest brother stand there with the dish towel and feel, without understanding why, that he had walked into the middle of something he was not part of. Solomon stepped inside when Renee asked him to. He crossed the small front room to the chair by the window, where the old woman sat with the Bible in her lap, the same soft dark Bible, returned to her now. Renee Holloway looked up at the tall man standing in her front room. She did not ask his name. She looked at his face for a long moment with her clear, unhurried eyes, the way she had once looked at a boy in the back of a church, and something in her went soft and sure, and she smiled. "Solomon Tate," she said. "I always knew you'd find your way back to this house." Solomon's mouth worked and nothing came out of it. This grown man, this man whose name bankers returned calls for, stood in a narrow shotgun house in South Memphis and could not speak, and the old woman patted the arm of the chair beside her with one thin hand. "Sit down here," she said. "You always did stand by the door like you wasn't sure you could stay. Sit down. You can stay." He sat. And he stayed 45 minutes, and Miss Dot did most of the talking, the way she always had, and Solomon listened the way he had listened at 19. And in the kitchen Deshaun and Andre stood very quiet, beginning to understand that a man they had never met had done the thing they would not do, and that there was no way to be in the room with that fact and come out of it the same. When Solomon left, Deshaun followed Renee out onto the porch. He stood there a while with his hands in his pockets, watching the rental car pull away down Effie Road, and Renee waited, because she could feel that her brother had something in him that needed to come out and that it would come out crooked, the way hard things did with Deshaun. "Who is that?" he said finally. "Somebody Mama was good to a long time ago," Renee said, "before any of us were born." Deshaun nodded slow. He looked at the porch boards. "He's the one paid for the surgery." It was not a question. He had done the arithmetic the moment he saw the man at the chair by the window, the way he could total a repair estimate in his head. "Yes." Deshaun was quiet for a long time. A car went by. Down the street a screen door banged. When he spoke again his voice had lost the edge it always had with her, and what was under the edge was a thing she had not heard from her brother since they were children. "I keep telling myself it's because I couldn't," he said. "The money, I keep telling myself that. And it's true, Renee, I couldn't pull 14,000 out the shop, that part's true." He stopped, but a stranger did it. A man that owed this family nothing, and I've been her son for 36 years. He pressed the heel of his hand against his eye, once hard, the way men do when they have decided not to cry and are losing. What kind of man lets a stranger be a better son to his mama than he is? Renee could have said a great many things. She had earned the right to say them. She had a folder full of them, 10 years deep. She did not say any of them. She had learned something in the cool, empty church 3 weeks before, holding a check and a note in the same 2 hands. And what she had learned was that her mother's whole life had been the refusal to keep score, that the silence was the gift, that you do not collect on the people who failed you. You just go on quietly being the thing they could not be. "You can still be that," is what she said. "She's alive, Deshaun. She's right in there in that chair. You don't get the chance to pay the 14,000. That chance is gone, but you got the chance to go sit with her. That one's still open. He left it open for you." Deshaun went inside and sat with his mother. Renee did not watch. She stayed on the porch and gave them the room, the way you give a thing the room to grow, and through the screen door she heard, after a while, her brother laughing low at something the old woman's said. And she heard her mother's voice answer, light and certain, the way it had always been, and she stood in the long gold evening and let that be enough. The money was the smallest part of what Solomon did, and he knew it, and he was careful with the rest. He had learned from Estelle that Renee had once been most of the way to becoming a nurse and had set it down to keep her mother alive. He sat with that for a few days, then he made a call. Not to hand Renee anything, he was his mother's son, and he knew that what you hand a proud person free can sit on them like a debt. But to open a door and make her walk through it on her own legs. He paid the tuition for the 3 remaining semesters at the nursing program, on one condition, that Renee retest, reapply, and earn her place back like anyone else. He would pay, she would do the work. He would not be thanked for it and he would not watch. Renee did not say yes right away. She stood on the porch with him the evening he told her, and she looked at this man she had known for 3 weeks, and she asked the only question that mattered to her. "Why me?" Solomon looked out at the street, at the corner store on the end, at the long gold light coming down between the houses. "Because she saw me," he said, "when nobody else did. That's the whole thing. That's all I ever wanted to pay back, and there's no paying it back, so the best I can do is pass it down the line. Your mother gets to keep breathing a while longer. That's for her. And you." He turned and looked at Renee and his voice was plain. You've been invisible long enough. I know what that's worth, what you've been doing all these years, quiet, with nobody keeping your seat. Somebody ought to keep yours for a change. I'd like it to be me. Renee Holloway started nursing school again that fall, at 34, in a classroom full of people half her age, and she was the best student in it, because she had spent 10 years learning the thing they teach you last, which is how to sit with a person who is afraid. It was not easy, and she did not pretend it was. She kept her shifts in the cafeteria the first year because the tuition was paid, but the rent was not, and she studied on the number 50 in both directions and at the kitchen table on Effie Road while her mother dozed in the chair, and there were nights she did not believe a woman her age, this tired, could hold organic chemistry in her head alongside everything else she was holding. On one of those nights, she said as much quietly to her mother, expecting nothing, just needing to say it into the room. Miss Dot did not open her eyes. "You've been carrying this whole family up a hill 10 years, baby," she said. "Don't tell me you can't carry a book." Renee carried the book. She passed the class with the highest mark in it, and she did not tell anyone that either. 18 months later she passed her boards and pinned on a name tag at Methodist South Hospital, the same building where she had run a breakfast line in a tea-colored apron. And the first time she rode up in the staff elevator instead of the service elevator, she had to stop on the 4th floor and stand in the hall outside a room that used to be 412 and let herself feel the size of it. She kept some of the old habits. On Fridays, when her shift allowed, she still made up a tray for a patient on her floor who had no visitors, and she still left it without knocking, because some things you do are between you and the Lord, and you go on and mind the bulletins. And she did one new thing. She took $50 out of every paycheck and she started a small fund, kept with the hospital's charity office, for patients being discharged who had no way to get home, bus fare, a cab, a tank of gas for the cousin who came to fetch them. It was not much. $50 a paycheck does not change the world. But it changed it for the woman on a Tuesday who would otherwise have had to walk 4 miles from a surgery, and for the old man whose grandson could not afford the gas, and for the others, one at a time, quietly, the way water wears a stone. She named the fund the D. Holloway Care Fund. She did not tell her mother. Miss Dot found out the way she found everything out, eventually through the church grapevine and a slip from Estelle, and she did not say much about it, only sat in her chair by the window with her Bible in her lap and her thumb on the 23rd Psalm, where a soft brown note had been pressed flat again between the pages, returned to where it had lived for 30 years. The fund was never large, and Renee never let it be talked about. But it moved the way a small thing moves when you keep feeding it. There was a woman named Loretta, 61, discharged after a hip replacement with no ride and no money for one, who would have sat in the lobby until they made her leave. The fund put her in a cab and sent her home. There was a young father, his arm in a cast he could not work with, who needed bus fare for 2 weeks until his disability cleared. The fund covered the 2 weeks. There was an old man, a veteran, who needed a tank of gas so his nephew in Olive Branch could come and get him, and the fund bought the gas, and the man cried at the discharge desk in a way that embarrassed him. And the nurse who arranged it, a tall, calm woman in her 30s with a steady face, told him it was nothing, told him to go on home, told him somebody had set it aside for exactly this and there was no need to thank anybody. She did not tell him whose hand it had passed through before it reached his. That was between her and the Lord. She went on and minded the floor. At Greater Calvary, on the back of pew 12, a small wooden plate appeared one afternoon. No one saw who put it there, though Estelle Cook went home that evening looking quietly satisfied. It was no bigger than a hymnal, varnished dark, and it had words carved into it in plain letters, and the words said, "Reserved for those who have nowhere else to go." People asked about it for a while, and then they stopped asking, the way a congregation absorbs a small mystery into the body of itself, and on Sunday mornings the seat sat empty more often than not, kept, the way it had always been kept, for whoever came in late and small and unsure they were allowed to stay. Renee thinks about her mother's saying on the nights she works the floor alone. It comes to her around 3 in the morning, the dead middle of a long shift, when the hospital goes quiet and the only sounds are the machines keeping their patient count of the living, and she is sitting in a hard chair beside a bed where someone is afraid and has no one. Holloway women don't wait for saving, baby. We do the saving. Her mother said it on a hot porch the year her father left, with peas falling into a metal bowl, and Renee had carried it like a stone, smoothed from handling, and she had believed for a long time that it meant she had to do everything herself, alone, unthanked, until it broke her. She does not think it means that anymore. She thinks now that her mother had it right in a way Renee took years to understand. That you don't wait to be saved, no, but the saving was never something you did alone in the dark. It was a thing you passed, hand to hand, quiet, asking nothing. A seat kept for a stranger, a sandwich on a bench, a note that says God sees you, a check for the exact amount, a tray outside a door, $50 a paycheck. You do the saving, and someday when you have done enough of it without ever being seen, somebody you never met walks into a church and saves you back. So here is the question, the one she sits with at 3 in the morning, and the one I want to leave you with. If a stranger paid for your mother's surgery when your own brothers would not, would you ever be able to forgive them? Could you sit at that kitchen table again at the holidays and pass the greens and let it go? Or would you do what Renee did, say nothing, forgive nothing out loud, and quietly become the kind of person who makes sure that no stranger ever has to do it again? I don't know that there's a right answer, but I'd like to hear yours. Okay, so I keep coming back to one line in this. She never told a soul. That's the one. The mother kept a seat for a stranger 2 years, and she never told anybody, not even her own daughter. I don't know if I could do that, keep something good that quiet. I think most of us want a little credit. I know I do. And the daughter didn't know. She'd been doing the same quiet thing for years. Food left outside a door, never knocking. She learned it without anybody telling her. I'm at the age where the older people in my life are starting to slow down. I don't always know what to say to them. This one made me want to call somebody before it's too late. If you're up right now, sitting next to someone who's scared, you already know this woman. You might be her. I don't have a clean ending for this. I just keep thinking about that seat. Somebody kept it, quietly. I'll be back soon with another story about the people we walk right past.